These colonists have the same construction skill, but the one on the right builds 8 times as fast. Knowing how to identify and best take advantage of your good and weak villagers alike will help catapult your settlement forward. I'm going to explain the most important stats, how to tailor your villagers' jobs to take advantage of both good and bad perks, and what kind of job distribution you might want for your village through the start, mid, and late game. There are a lot of different perks. Some give small mood changes for things like being out in the sun. Some make your villagers a little more susceptible to the elements. But the most important ones give powerful buffs and debuffs to your villagers. These affect your villagers' stats, and the most important ones are movement speed, global work speed, and motor function. The first is self-explanatory, but can be up to halved or almost doubled by various perks. You can plan around this by considering which jobs require more or less moving. Animal husbandry, building, botany, mining, and hauling all require a lot of running around, making settlers that have perks that make them faster particularly suited for these. Meanwhile, most crafting jobs require relatively little running, which makes research, smithing, and carpentry perfect fits for settlers that are on the slower side. Global work speed and motor function both affect how quickly your villagers will handle most jobs. These effects are multiplicative. Longtime viewers might remember a video I put out a few months before this one detailing a bug that caused bonuses to these to actually make production jobs slower. That's fortunately been fixed, so you don't have to worry about ruining your villagers with good perks. But like before, these stats don't affect every job. Global work speed doesn't affect combat attack speed, motor function doesn't affect planting or research, and neither affects taming and training animals. Perks that affect these stats, like Moribund or Elfshot, only take away about 20% of their productivity each. It's not a huge deal, but while one perk isn't too bad, by the time you're at 10 villagers, you'll probably have a couple that have 2 or even 3 of these bad perks, and it's disastrous for them. Your villagers that struggle on this front aren't even necessarily good fits for the rare jobs that don't use them, like hauling and animal husbandry, since some of the negative perks come with movement speed penalties as well. Instead, try to put these people where you want skilled labor but don't need too much of it. Carpentry, tailoring if you're not breaking down too much enemy gear, and animal husbandry are all good fits. Your villagers will still train up well even with slower production, and you only need a limited number of what they'll eventually make. Your villagers that are more productive are better suited for jobs where there's always more to do. Lastly, some perks affect their mood target. The default of 50 is affected by perks, then further raised or lowered by good or bad things happening to the villagers. A villager's mood will move towards this mood target. Low mood means 15 or below, which will make your colonists rebel. They'll idle around and ignore commands to do any work. A high mood of 85 will increase their inspiration, which affects the final quality of a crafted item. How crafting quality is calculated is a little bit too long of a topic for this video, but know that even the modest buff you get to inspiration is still fairly impactful for getting some flawless pieces early on. Even one mood buffing perk matters a lot for this, so consider putting anyone who fits the bill on a crafting job, but especially smithing. Mood dampening perks aren't important for determining jobs. That's enough about stats and perks themselves. Let's move on to actually getting them. Villagers have a small chance to gain a perk on their birthday, but they'll get most of their perks upon character creation. The default A New Life scenario only lets you control your starting 3 villagers, but custom scenarios are more, well, customizable. You can control the number of villagers you'll start with, but you can also control a lot about the settlers you'll randomly gain through events. The main way you can affect them is via forced perks. These let you choose perks to apply to some random percent or all of your villagers. You can make half your incoming villagers cannibals and eat those that aren't. Alternatively, if you want an easier or a harder time, you can give all of your settlers good or bad perks respectively. After that, you'll be looking at the character customization screen, where you can proceed with the game, randomize your villagers, or customize them further. Leaving it up to randomness might make for more variety, but I still prefer advanced customization to help shape the story a little bit. That lets you change perks, skills, passions, and their history. Backgrounds and pseudonyms only give these skills a few points and don't otherwise impact gameplay. Passions increase experience gained at 2.5 times the base rate for 1 star and 4 times for 2 stars, although this isn't as good as it sounds at first. Experience caps reduce experience past a certain point. A young settler that would gain 1500 base experience in a skill instead gains 1300 without any passions, but 2 stars of passions only give them another 500 experience. That's still almost 50% more, but it's not critical for a master smith to actually like their job. Passions are useful for some skills that are harder to cap, like marksman, or skills that have large amounts of experience gained at once, like speechcraft or crafting. Working a job that a villager is passionate at will also give them a small mood buff, which can help put them in a good mood if they're on the precipice. It should be noted that you can't just max out every skill because of group creation points. Increasing skills, giving them passions, and giving them good perks will use these up, while giving them bad perks will refund some. The total amount you can spend is determined by how many villagers you have. A randomly generated group of 3 settlers will use about 400 points. Use that as a baseline if you want to customize your settlers without making them too powerful. So how should you distribute your jobs? Some skills are more important early on. Construction, intellectual, and botany are cornerstones of an early village. Animal handling is really good too if you're starting with some domestic animals that you want to turn into pets, like in the default scenario. One botanist and cook, one builder and animal tamer, and one researcher will get you off to a good start. If you plan on building underground, especially on a mountain map, you'll likely want a miner instead of a botanist. If you want to plan more for the long term, give someone a passion for smithing. That said, hauling is really important early on. Don't be afraid to have a full-time hauler even if you only have 4 or 5 villagers. Pets will help with this once you've got them, but that's going to take some time. The other skills are more useful in the mid to late game when you'll likely have naturally stumbled across a villager good at one of them, or at least partially circumventable. The gap between the easy to make longbow and hard to make heavy crossbow isn't that large. The buff from high quality clothes is a minor +5 to mood, combat stats can be trained up over time, and so on. In the mid game, add on crafters and more niche jobs like miners or full-time cooks as the need arises, as you get villagers that are decent for it, and as you unlock technologies that keep them busy like booze, steel, and better gear to make. In the late game, when you've gotten 10 to 15 villagers, you need far less food than you'd think. I can't tell you how many times I've seen stockpiles, my own included, with years of food, giving you nothing to do with your botanist and fields full of rotting food. One full-timer and one part-timer harvesting crops, working skeps, or hunting animals will do. You're going to want one full-time cook to make enough booze and food. A full-time smith will keep you armed and armored. You may want a second and a full-time tailor if you're breaking down a lot of gear from big raids. You shouldn't need a full-time carpenter or miner unless you're building underground. Pets can handle hauling in the late game, although a few villagers can supplement this until you've got an army of goats and or calves to do the job. Jobs that don't need full-time work, like carpentry and tailoring, are really good for these people. One researcher to finish off the technology tree will do. If you like big building projects like massive towns, walls, and decorations, go with 3 or 4 builders. If not, 1 or 2 will do. That's a good basis. Use any remaining villagers to bridge gaps and other shortcomings that you find yourself struggling with. If you've enjoyed this full guide to character creation, you're probably going to like a deep dive I made into combat. After all, even the best setup can still crumble before a big raid.